These are my note cards. As a little girl, I grew up with my father, but not knowing him as much as I knew myself as an adolescent. We lived and breathed in the same confines of our beautiful home. I learned to adore my mother, but I loathed my father. It was from the distance me and him had that created a conflict inside of me that I eventually had to resolve. My family and friends often ask me of my countenance of me being sad very often. And of course, I suppressed those feelings because I didn't want to deal with the real problem. Ultimately, I had no joy and I had no peace in my life. This was because of the conflict, the issues me and my father had that I always suppressed down. Conflict is in everyone's life, whether we choose to confront these situations or avoid them. Helen Keller said, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experiences of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. Conflict will happen in all relationships. Conflict will exist in relationships ranging from our family, our friends, and our coworkers. Conflict is inevitable. According to Strayhorn, avoiding conflict can result in bigger problems, and in these bigger problems, they will be harder to resolve. Conflict is something that we cannot avoid and we cannot run from because ultimately they will lead us to a lot of grief and stress in our lives. So my solution is to not run from conflict. The CDP Conflict Dynamics Profile states that people often avoid conflict because they fear hurting others or causing more problems. It's best to understand that you should not think that avoiding and running from your conflict will ultimately lead you to less problems. Writer Natalie Hill and That's Easy Learning lists the following other reasons why people choose to avoid their conflict. These reasons include denial and unsureness. People are scared to stand up for themselves, and people think that their perceptions of their conflict are not valid. So my solution to conflict is confrontation. By confronting your conflicts in your life, this will create better dialogue between you and the person that you have conflict with, and ultimately can guide the way for mature dialogue. Conflict can also make you a more successful person because you're able to handle difficult situations in your life. Love is Respect provides 4 tips to help with conflict. Tip 1, create boundaries of respect. Tip 2, articulate the real reason for your conflict. Tip 3, remember conflict issues can be agreed to disagree. And tip 4, remember to have compassion, compromise, empathy to help resolve your issues. I ask that you try to take these 4 tips and apply them to any conflict issues that you may have in your life and see if it is successful. So I guess you're wondering, did I resolve my conflict with my father? Why, yes, I did. As I stated previously, the conflict between my father ultimately made me into a person I didn't know who I was. The conflict from the conflict and the emotions that I experienced with my father ultimately became a ball of fire on the inside of me. From this fire, I was able to blindly commit and say all of my fears and my problems that I experienced from my father. And to my surprise, he returned with love and compassion in his words towards me. It was then I was able to truly understand my father. I understand the distance that my father had with me, and he was able to understand that my cold disconnect from him as a child. Ultimately, this relationship that I have with my father has been restored, and we have had a blossom relationship since. This is because I chose to create boundaries of respect. I was able to articulate my real reason for my conflict with my father. I was able to understand I did not have to agree with everything my father said. And ultimately, I showed compassion and empathy towards my father to help resolve our issues altogether. As a result, I take this scenario in my life with me everywhere I go in any conflict that I encounter. Will you?